everyone. Call this meeting of the El Paso County Planning Commission to order. I'm Tom Bailey, the chair, and my first order of business, as always, is to introduce my colleagues who will be hearing and voting and making recommendations on these items. So we have to my far right, Mr. Byers, we have Mr. Whitney, we have Ms. Jack, we have Ms. Fuller, we have Mr. Trowbridge, Mr. Shipples, and Mr. Smith. And the chair will also be voting, so we'll be very careful not to have any ties. With 8 of us up here, I think we can maybe avoid that today, I hope. And with that, next we move into our report items, and so I'll turn it over to Ms. Harrington or Mr. Kilgore from the Planning Department.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Megan Harrington, Planning Director. I don't have anything for you this morning. I would ask Mr. Kilgore if he had any announcements. Thank you.
No, sir. Please proceed.
Okay, we will do that. Thank you very much. As I think pretty much everybody in the audience knows, we always make time for public comment on items that are not on our agenda. Is there anyone here who would like to make a comment on an item that is not on today's agenda? I don't see anyone, and I'm guessing there's nobody listening out there in Teams land or Zoom land or wherever it is this week. Don't hear anything, so we'll move on to that. Move right into our consent items on our agenda today. First of which is adoption of our minutes from the meeting we held 2 weeks ago on September 5th. Commissioners have had a chance to review those and comment as necessary. Are there any additional comments, questions, additions, corrections? Seeing none, we'll deem the minutes of the September 4th and September 5th meeting, right? Is that what I said? September 5th meeting approved as presented. And then we have one other consent item. Item 3B, file number SF2325, the final plat for Rhetoric subdivision. Do any commissioners have questions for staff or Mr. Trowbridge?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, we normally don't see final plats. Is it because the water wasn't done at the preliminary? Just curious.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kylie Bagley. I was the planner on the project. That is correct. We did a combined final plat preliminary plan, so there is a water finding associated with this plat.
Thank you for repairing the microphone. Is there anyone in the audience other than the applicant here for that item? We did get a couple of late comments, or was it on that one? No, that's the other.
Those are on the next
one.
item.
We've already read those. So any further discussion on agenda item 3B? If not, I'll recognize Ms. Jack. Oh,
No, I was just pulling my microphone down, but I could do.
why don't you?
Okay. That, I'll
Just-
pay more attention to what I'm doing here. Mr. Chair, with regards to agenda item 3B, file number SF2325 for a final plat for Rhetoric subdivision, I love that name. I move for approval in accordance with attached resolution with 9 conditions, 3 notations, and a finding for sufficiency with regard to water quality, quantity, and sufficiency, I guess. And I move approval and have it forwarded to the Board of County Commissioners for their consideration.
I will second.
Myers, thank you for the second. Any discussion on that matter? Seeing none, I will call the roll. I'll turn my microphone on first. Call the roll. Thank you. Let's begin with Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Shipples.
Aye.
Mr. Trowbridge.
Aye.
Ms. Fuller.
Aye.
Ms. Jack.
Aye.
Mr. Whitney.
Aye.
Mr. Byers.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. We'll recommend that item to the Board of County Commissioners for their approval. Thank you very much. We'll move on into the regular items. Agenda item 5A. File number SKP 237, a sketch plan for Esteban Rodriguez. Mr. Hauser is already there. Good morning.
Hello. For the record, Ryan Hauser with Planning and Community Development. And this is the presentation, the staff presentation for file number SKP 237 for the Esteban Rodriguez sketch plan. Again, my name is Ryan with Public Works Development Services Engineering. We have Daniel Torres. To those who may be watching remotely, if you've not provided a name and phone number, please email that information to pcdhearings@elpasoco.com. So this request is for a sketch plan, and before I get into detail, I would just like to state for the record, sketch plan is for larger subdivisions, the first step in a subdivision process. It is more conceptual. It's more of an evaluation of the feasibility of the plan. So when we talk about things like traffic or water, we're not making any major decisions at this time. It's more just a thought of, is it even possible to proceed with a future subdivision? So what this contemplates, I have the acreages here with the different land uses that are being proposed within the sketch plan area. These would be essentially a maximum development potential, not saying today they would be allowed to have 142 single-family lots and 15 acres of commercial development, but if it's designed in a way that accommodates the expectation, it could result in potentially a maximum of this amount with the breakdown that's shown on the screen. So they're currently showing about 120 acres of single-family residential 5-acre lots, about 300 acres of 2.5-acre lots, 15 acres of commercial, and then the remainder of open space, rights-of-way, stormwater facilities. So again, we'll get into a little bit more detail on the actual design and the actual number of lots and the actual acreages of those lots with the subsequent preliminary plan and final plat applications. Here's just an image of the proposal. It is shifted counterclockwise, so north is facing west on this picture, with Judge Orr Road on the west side here. You can see the red pinkish portion is that 15 acres of proposed commercial area, the yellow being the 5-acre lots and the green being the 2.5-acre lots with these pockets of open space, and then no build for the drainage way that runs through the property. I won't stop to go over the criteria in detail, but I do want to at least emphasize, because I know water is a constant discussion that we have with every process. The fourth bullet point here, probable is the key word here, that we're making a probable finding that they could possibly get a water finding at future stages. And I will state for the record too that the applicant did provide a detailed water resource report with this application that identified possibility that there could be water sufficiency at a later stage. So here's the zoning map just showing the relationship this property has to the surrounding zoning districts. I think this is fairly interesting when considering the different land uses that they're proposing within the sketch plan area. You have Saddlehorn Ranch immediately to the west of the subject property with primarily lots with a minimum lot size of 2.5 acres. To the south, that RR5 portion is the Sage Creek subdivision with 5-acre lots, and then further south there are 2.5-acre lots. And then if you go further west from Saddlehorn Ranch, you'll see the Meadow Lake Airport and the more dense urban development that we've come to see in the Falcon area. To the north of the property, just across the street from Judge Orr Road, you all might recognize that is the Bosse's property that was recently before you for an approval of location for a higher education school site. And then cat-cornered northwest corner of Judge Orr and Elbert is the Jane Davis Ranch sketch plan, which has not come before you yet, but is currently under review by county staff, representing a similar development proposal to what's being contemplated on this property. So if I can go back briefly, I think it's important to recognize all of this green being the 2.5 acre lots could be a logical extension of those 2.5 acre lot sizes that we're seeing in Saddlehorn Ranch. And then these 5 acre lots coming down on this side as a logical extension of the 5 acre lots that we're seeing to the south of the property. And then the proposal to site commercial, community commercial scaled uses along the major intersection there at Judge Orr and Elbert is generally what the land use pattern is looking like for this. With regards to the master plan, place type being large lot residential, staff has found that the proposal is consistent with the recommendations of the large lot residential place type. New development area of change contemplating a significant change in character for the area. I wouldn't say that this proposal is significantly different in character from the other developments we're seeing in this area, as you could kind of tell from looking at the zoning map and the other developments that we've seen. However, the master plan does contemplate that these areas are expected to develop in the future. There is no key area. However, this is located in the large lot residential priority development area, which does create a little bit more of a priority for us to be contemplating developments of this nature in this area of the county. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Daniel to go over the drainage and transportation components.
Morning, Commissioners. Daniel Torres with Engineering. In terms of drainage, there is a FEMA floodplain that goes through the site. Any modifications to that floodplain would require them to go through the FEMA process of a CLOMR or LOMR. It is within the Geek Ranch and Hagler Ranch drainage basins. Drainage fees would be due at final plat recordation. They did submit a master development drainage plan to analyze the drainage for the site. There will be subsequent preliminary and final drainage reports as this project progresses. They are proposing 5 full spectrum detention ponds to mitigate their developed flows. In terms of transportation, as Ryan mentioned, it is located on the intersection of Elbert Road and Judge Orr. A master traffic study was submitted with the project that identified improvements consisting of auxiliary turn lanes, roadway improvements, and signalization, particularly the one in Highway 24 in Stapleton. CDOT has been collecting escrow funds from the various projects in the area. So that's anticipated to be done at the subsequent stages as well. The access points, as Ryan mentioned, is all conceptual at this stage. Final design would be provided at those preliminary plan applications. Any questions in regards to drainage and transportation?
Don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Planning staff notified 22 property owners for the for today's hearing and the Board of County Commissioners hearing. You do have copies of the responses that we received in front of you. We did receive a couple of days ago, so they weren't able to make it into the full packet, but they have been printed and provided for your review. And with that, that would conclude the staff presentation. If there are no questions for staff, I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Gooman, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Bill Gooman with William Gooman and Associates. We are the planner and actually the applicant for Brent Hauser Enterprises, working in conjunction with Esteban Rodriguez, who is the authorized representative for Brent Hauser Enterprises. And this is our presentation for the sketch plan. I apologize for the October 10th date on the screen here. We jumped ahead of ourselves, and we know today's not October 10th, but this is for consideration of the 498 acres or 93.21 acres of the Esteban Rodriguez sketch plan. As Ryan had previously indicated, this is within the immediate vicinity of the Saddlehorn Ranch project, which is currently under construction, the BOCES project, which we received approval for the approval of location, and the Jane Davis Ranch, which is to the northeast of the site here, and also to the east of us, we have Old West Ranches, which are 35-acre ranchettes on a 35 zone property. This gives you an idea of what's in the vicinity and what's either been approved or is under consideration for approval. This is an outline of the surrounding communities, which here we have the Esteban Rodriguez subdivision, 493 acres with a good sized chunk of it set aside for drainage and floodplain area, which we are designating on the sketch plan as no build areas. There may be a county trail that runs through that, which would be contiguous to the county trail that was approved with the Saddlehorn Ranch development. Sage Creek is to the south of us. We're immediately adjacent to an existing subdivision of 5-acre lots that is developed. There are homes that exist there. Saddlehorn Ranch, this is a fairly recent aerial photo. We did the original entitlement for Saddlehorn Ranch. There are 218 homes that are approved on 2.5-acre lots within the 816 acre development for Saddlehorn Ranch. The streets that you see have actually been cut in, so those exist as of today. And there are about 15 homes on 2.5-acre lots that have been constructed or under construction. And I'm pointing this out because right here, when Saddlehorn Ranch was approved, this cul-de-sac does cut through and connect to the Rodriguez subdivision, and I'll get to that in a second. Old West Ranches I mentioned, which is formerly the Santa Fe Springs development that had originally been approved for urban density of up to 5,300 units of mixed-use residential and commercial. No more. It's all 35-acre ranchettes, which are under construction, and you see some of the roads that have been cut in and some of the houses that have already been constructed. The BOCES campus to our north, the Jane Davis Ranch, which Ryan had mentioned, is under consideration by staff. That again is in sketch plan development. This is a different view to help put everything into perspective of what everything looks like. We're also showing the access point, which will be an extension from the existing Elbert Road, which is on the west end of the Bosse's property. The second access is Judge Orr Road access. And again, the access 3, that is the Lenoria Way, which is from Saddlehorn Ranch. So we've got 3 points of access proposed to serve this subdivision. This is a copy of what had been submitted for our sketch plan. There's a ton of information here. We're proposing for up to 140, 142, 144, whatever works within the layout of the site. What we consciously attempted to do was create a transition between the 35-acre lots in Old West Ranches and the 5-acre lots that are at Sage Creek by placing our 5-acre lots, the 119-acre figure that Ryan mentioned, adjacent to those 2 developments. We thought going from 35 and then 5 to 5-acre lots was a good transition before going to the 2.5-acre lots, which are compatible with the 2.5-acre lots that are adjacent to us in the Saddlehorn Ranch subdivision. The red or the salmon color parcels along Judge Orr Road are at this point being proposed as commercial community uses. No big box, no major retail outlets or anything. You might see a Maverick gas station or a convenience store here. There, I know, has been many warehouses looking to build in this area. It's open. We don't have any particular user slated for that, but we thought that the commercial community use along Judge Orr Road was the most appropriate for the sketch plan. Again, we're showing the 5 detention ponds that Daniel had mentioned. We're also showing in the central location an 8-acre park site. Since this was submitted, County Parks got back to us and said they'd rather have fees in lieu of land. And the next version of this plan you see may not have a park there because there was no interest to develop a park there. So I just wanted to point that out. So when we come back before you, if you say, hey, where's the park? There was a request for fees in lieu of land, but you have a little bit of background on that. This is another view of the developed area. And while we do have the intent to have some of our 2.5-acre lots and a couple of the 5-acre lots encroach into the drainage way, all of the drainage ways on the sketch plan are designated as no build. So a lot may have 10,000 square feet eventually that encroaches into the floodplain of that. That 10,000 square feet will be clearly marked no build, and the balance of the acreage of that lot would be buildable. Again, you see the individual lots of Sage Creek to the right side of the plan. The overall intent of the Rodriguez subdivision is very compatible with what the county has allowed to occur in this particular portion of the Judge Orr Road corridor. Nothing exceptional. Most of the lots are 2.5 acres, but we do have, as I mentioned, over 100 acres of 5-acre lots as well. The commercial lots that I mentioned will most likely be subdivided into 2.5 acre chunks. Somebody wants to buy more than that, they're certainly welcome to, but we did the 2.5 acre minimum size based on water and wastewater requirements that are defined by county health, which says 2.5 acres is the minimum lot size that you can develop and still do well and septic. Which leads us to water and wastewater. The water resources report that had been submitted for review by staff with this application does confirm that there is adequate water to serve this development. Obviously, there have been no finding of sufficiency yet. That won't come until a later phase of development, but the water resources study, which we had prepared by our hydrologist, does confirm that this particular development can be supported by well and septic. That said, I'll go out on a limb. The commission had done the approval of location for the BOCES project a couple of weeks ago. BOCES intends to develop and create a special district for a water treatment facility to allow for central water services to be extended into the BOCES property, but also to allow several of the adjacent neighborhoods that are proposed to participate in that central water system. So the intent of that is we're proposing 142 single-family residential lots here instead of 142 individual well and septic systems. This is a candidate to be included in that central water supply. So we think that's an attractive feature for this. I'll also share with you that the Jane Davis Ranch, which you will see from us next as far as the sketch plan goes, is also a candidate to participate in that central water system. So we're doing our best to try to ensure you're not going to have wells and septics all over Judge Orr Road here. I think the county would prefer a central water system as well versus individual well and septic. So we're concurring with staff in saying that the proposed sketch plan is consistent with the El Paso County Master Plan, which is cited in staff's report. The sketch plan application meets all sketch plan submittal requirements and standards for divisions of land in Chapter 7 of the county's development code. There are 2 conditions in addition to the
Mr. Goodman,
recommendations.
let me stop you there for a second. Ms. Jack, you had a
I'm sorry.
question?
Sorry, I just had a quick question. When you do a central water system like that, it's paid for by the district, the special district.
Correct.
Then these other developments become members of that district? Or
Good
is,
question, Ms. Jack. We actually had met as the applicant for BOCES with county attorneys on Thursday of last week on what it will require to create and establish either a metro district or a water district or a special improvement district. The details have not been worked out yet because what we're looking at is actually a hybrid between private interests and public interests. But the water district itself would be funded by the public entity, by BOCES, who would actually foot the bill for the the water treatment facility and possibly extending water mains into these adjacent properties. The service plan has not been drawn up or reviewed by the county attorney yet. That's yet to come. Right now, we've made the applications with the understanding that if everything goes south, that both of these, or actually the Rodriguez subdivision, can stand alone based on the amount of water that's available to support this development without becoming a member of the water district. But there are details that are being worked out with the county, and by the time a preliminary plan and development plan is presented to you, we will have that worked out. The conditions, there are two of them, which are before you. There are also notations which we are in agreement to have as a condition of approval of the sketch plan. And I'd be glad to try and answer any other questions you might have. But our request is for approval of the Esteban Rodriguez sketch plan with the recommended conditions and notations as they appear here as a condition of approval.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Thank you. Oh, one more.
I don't mean to be a pain, but I'm just really curious. How many, when you create a water district and you have several developments as members, how many can they serve ultimately?
Excuse me, how many?
How many homes, or how
Okay.
much could it serve ultimately?
We had proposed the BOCES campus with up to 121 single-family staff housing on it. In all likelihood, that number will be about 75 or 80 homes. There are 142 homes proposed in the sketch plan for Rodriguez. There are 92 homes proposed in the Jane Davis sketch plan that you have not seen yet. The water resources plan accounts for the total of those three developments. So add those three, the 121, the 142, and the 92. We do have adequate resources to provide water for those three developments should the central water system be extended into all of these developments. The water treatment facility plant is being planned and engineered right now such that it will accommodate the total of those developments. Again, we do not have any signed agreements or contracts with the private developments to participate in the central water system that BOCES will develop. BOCES, I will tell you, is committed. As we shared with you previously, I believe that come hell or high water, they're going to, no pun intended, but they are going to develop the central water treatment facility because they need that to support themselves. We saw this as an attractive amenity that would be made available to adjacent private developments. But our initial findings are that it will, the central water treatment facility will provide adequate water to serve the total of those three developments. And again, you'll see more of that when preliminary plans and development plans come before you.
And maybe this is a question for staff, and I'm not sure. I guess what I'm really trying to figure out is, rather than drilling wells all the time, why we don't do this more often, and how many communities could be served in the county this way. And maybe that it's not a question for you and something I need to educate myself on, but.
It's a great question. It really is. And you're certainly aware as a planning commission, the matter of water probably comes before you with every application that you review. I'll share with you that the cost to develop a water treatment facility plant, which BOCES will handle, is estimated at about $5.5 million right now. So that could be one of the answers as far as why everybody doesn't do this instead of drilling wells all over the place. We see this, and BOCES sees this as a great opportunity to create a central water system that serves close to 350, 400 homes off of one central water supply. It's true, the water treatment facility will have to drill a well or two. I'm not sure what our engineers are proposing at the moment, but it is certainly a viable option in the future moving forward, especially when you have developments like this that are adjacent to one another. We've got 3 large developments, and this excludes Saddlehorn Ranch because they have their own water treatment facility. All of those homes are on central water supply. There are no wells there. The old ranch estates, the 35-acre parcels that are adjacent to us, they are all wells. And I'm not totally sure, maybe staff is aware of the Sage Creek development that's adjacent to us all. I believe they are, I believe they're on a central water system also that, I forget the name of the metro district that services them, but this would certainly be a worthwhile consideration in the future when there are adjacent developments, is to pool their resources and to create a central water system that, means you're not drilling an individual well for each new home that's being constructed. You have one central location for water. The downside, as I mentioned, it's costly. I mean, it's pretty expensive to develop a water treatment facility, but in this particular case, we're confident that the Metro District attorneys, the county attorney, and BOCES will come up with a workable plan that'll accommodate these 3 subdivisions.
Great, thank you. Mr. Byers?
So I'm a little disappointed in the park going away. There appears to be a Metro District and or HOA proposed. Why wouldn't one of those 2 maintain the park?
If the park were to come to fruition, that would be an option.
But didn't you just tell us a few minutes ago that the park would not be part of the plan?
The park is not being required by county parks. The first round of review comments came back saying that this park is not on the county's list, or the vicinity that this park was proposed is not something that the County Parks Department had anticipated, and they did ask for fees in lieu of
Right, and
land.
fees in lieu work, but why would you not, as the developer, install the amenity and let the district maintain?
That's something that I don't know if I can answer. If the county does not choose to have a park in that location, what you're basically suggesting is that this would be a private park
Exactly.
and not a public park. And
Well, it would be public if it's a metro district, though. You'd have to have it open to the public.
Not necessarily. The Metro District, if it includes the Rodriguez subdivision, would be responsible for every development that's within its service area, which could be Rodriguez, it would be BOCES, it could be Davis, but that's not a public entity.
The metro district, though, once a metro district is created, I believe, and you guys can back this up, I believe that it does create a public facility, that you can't restrict the park.
I would have yeah. I'd have to defer to the county attorney on this.
Okay, well, the other piece of that, I think it's important as an amenity. I think it's a little bit of a sidestep to say, well, the county doesn't require it. You know, I think you as well, being a landscape architect, understand the value of this type of open space. So I would recommend that it's contemplated. The other question I have is related to drainage, and what is the concept for crossing this drainage? Is it, I mean, you have 2 points that cross, and I believe you're going to end up with a structure of some level, unless you're planning on doing something else. But they get pretty deep in there.
There's a crossing proposed here, and there is a crossing proposed here. It'll be handled pretty much the same way Saddlehorn Ranch was approved. There are culverts that go beneath the street to accommodate any drainage in those areas. We are including the no-build area in those drainage areas as part of our open space calculation, which I don't recall the number off the top of my head, but we're at about 16 or 17% open space, excluding the park. If we're directed to, develop an 8-acre park that the county parks department doesn't want or need, we'd be glad to reevaluate that.
Okay.
Ms. Seego.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to speak for a moment in defense of the County Parks Department. It is not generally the policy of El Paso County to own or maintain what we often call neighborhood parks, pocket parks, these smaller parks that are within neighborhoods. The county typically maintains regional parks, regional trails, and other regional facilities. So it would not, in my experience at least, be unusual for the County Parks Department to say that it is not interested in acquiring and maintaining an 8-acre park in an area like this. That's not to say that, as you've noted, that if the developer chooses, that they could create one or more parks if they felt that that would be an amenity to their development. And I certainly don't want to speak for the developer or impugn the developer, but from the county parks perspective, to say that the county is not interested in operating a park here doesn't mean that that the county parks department is saying that a park would not be a benefit or that there's no need for a park.
Right. And then funding the park and maintenance of the park could be handled by a metro district. Very simple.
It could be handled by a metro district. It could not be handled by a water district.
Right.
Those are two separate types of districts.
Absolutely.
It could also be handled by an HOA.
Okay. The other quick point. So the sketch plan does not show the connection to Saddlehorn, although you stated that there was a proposed connection.
Yeah, our circulation plan, which you're looking at here, essentially shows our major collector system, not minor streets. The Lenoria Way, which is right about here. We're not showing the internal street layout for Saddlehorn, but we planned this with Saddlehorn Ranch immediately adjacent to us. So we're aware of where Lenoria Way cuts through, which I believe is right about here. When you see...
Mr. Gilman, sorry, I'm not seeing your cursor, so if you could
Oh, I'm sorry.
describe.
I can see it
You
here.
can see it, but I don't think we can. Is that just straight south or straight
be-
below the park? Is that
In
dotted
that,
line?
in that
or-
general vicinity, that's correct. I'm sorry. I was assuming that I could see it. You guys have to see it too.
Yeah, sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. So that makes sense that that's where the connection is. I think I'd seen it on a different slide.
And-
But at the sketch plan level, the concept of a connection there is, is really all the detail that we need.
Correct,
Because there's a lot of
correct.
those things that will
And-
fall out later on in the process.
As Daniel Torres had mentioned also, when we showed the 3 points of connection, you can see where access 3 is located there. Lenoria Way is an existing street that has been cut in by the developers of Saddlehorn. That will be a point of connection. The other 2 are indicated, but as Daniel had mentioned, they're all subject to change based on future submittals. But this is initially what we are planning for.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Fuller.
I think we're getting a little bit off track as far as talking about the park, and that is for with the review criteria. That just comes later. And to me, like an 8.5 acre park where all these lots are 2.5 acres, I'm not sure it's really meaningful to the people that will live there. And I think we could just rely on the public or your customers in the future to make that decision. So I just think that we don't have to talk about where roads are going to connect and all that at this moment.
Thank you. Is there anything else that we're presenting here that you do have questions for? I think, our request demonstrates that this is very compatible with what we're calling right now the Judge Orr Road corridor. There's a lot of activity proposed in that area, and this is compatible with what has been approved by the county in the past and what you will see in the future when we come back to you with the Jane Davis Ranch sketch plan. And of course, the preliminary plan for the Rodriguez subdivision, which will probably have another name too. We asked the owner, do you want to call this something else? You want to name it after yourself or what? And so it may have another name when you see it next time. His call.
Do we have any other questions for Mr. Goodman, for the applicant here? Don't see any. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions for staff or any other discussion on this item? I don't see any. Okay, I will certainly entertain a motion. Ms. Fuller.
Mr. Chair, with regards to agenda item 5A for sketch plan for Esteban Rodriguez, I move for approval in accordance with the attached resolution with 2 conditions and 3 notations, and that this item be forwarded to the Board of County Commissioners for their consideration.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Trowbridge. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on this? Mr. Trowbridge.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, appreciate the discussion about the park. But I agree with Ms. Fuller that the lot sizes here, being that it's large, don't necessarily lend themselves to requiring a park. But I do appreciate that discussion. I also appreciate the applicant buffering the development with the 5 acre lots to provide that transition. I think that's a good idea in these cases. So I'm in favor of this.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, I will call the roll. Let me start down here. Mr. Byers.
Aye.
Mr. Whitney.
Aye.
Ms. Jack.
Aye.
Ms. Fuller.
Aye.
Mr. Trowbridge.
Aye.
Mr. Shipples.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Chair also votes aye. We will recommend this to the Board of County Commissioners for their approval. And thank you all. That takes us to the end of our action items for today, but we do have one non-action item. And would Mr. Hauser mind if we postpone this again? No. I'm just kidding. Thank you for. Yeah, well, sorry, I have been known to be cruel occasionally. I apologize. No, we appreciate your indulgence last time in putting it off. But this is something that I think we're all interested in seeing is just how we have implemented the master plan since it was adopted, because it's this follow through that's important, as important as the process of writing the plan. How are we doing in implementing it? So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, for the record, my name is Ryan Hauser. No relation to the previous developer. The spelling is different, if you all had noticed. Technically, I do. Yeah, the HOU is the more traditional spelling, apparently. So again, as was stated, this is more of an informal report on the first 3 years of implementation of the Your El Paso Master Plan, which was adopted in May of 2021. I won't read directly off the slides. A lot of this is copied and pasted out of the report that has been provided to you. The majority of this reporting is based on an analysis of what's referred to in the master plan as the implementation action matrix, which is basically the long list at the end of the master plan, at the end of chapter 14 of the policies, strategies, items that essentially, for lack of a better word, implement the master plan. So essentially what this was staff has gone through the entire list of policies and strategies, essentially determined which of those has been addressed, is in progress, is something that we're currently working on, items that maybe aren't being worked on right now or are not up for consideration right now, and categorized those into separate categories to sort of try to quantify how well the master plan has been implemented over the first 3 years. So this being the first initial reporting on the master plan, we're not contemplating any amendments to the master plan. We're not talking about removing any of the policies or the strategies or tweaking anything yet. This is essentially just, we're 3 years into a fairly long-term plan. How are we doing so far? And I think the results are going to be more positive than we would have expected for just a short amount of time. So these are the administration components in Chapter 14. Essentially, the idea here is that if we are able to perform these tasks regularly, then we'll essentially be positively implementing the master plan. You see regular use of the plan every single hearing we have, as we talked about earlier today with relevance to the previous project. Development and maintenance of partnership just kind of goes hand in hand with pretty much everything we do. And I actually created a category of policies that are directly related to that. I called it the global category. That is more based on addressing the policy with a partnership with another entity. Public communication, again, it's kind of what we're doing here today. We talk about the master plan at every hearing. We discuss the master plan with our applicants when they're getting ready to submit applications. Like I said, though, regular updates we're not contemplating at this stage. It's possible with further updates further down the road if we're starting to see patterns of things that maybe aren't being able to be addressed or things that may not be feasible, that were great ideas up front, but down the road might not be in the works. That might be when we might start to talk about making amendments to the master plan. The land development code, if I remember correctly, the master plan does talk about making regular updates to the land development code, which, as you all are aware from the recent presentation that our consultant gave, we are in the works to make an update to the land development code as a major component to administering the master plan. And that is one of the other categories that I've provided to categorize several of the policies and strategies that would be addressed with that land development code update. And then economic development, I believe in the packet I included several infographics that I received from our economic development department that goes hand in hand with implementing a lot of the strategies in the master plan. Did you all have a question for me? Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay. Just let me know if you need me to stop or
I
slow
was
down.
just
or-
trying to remember where it was.
Okay. So I'm going to try to get into the meat, and hopefully this is where the presentation will get interesting. There are 308 specific strategies within the implementation action matrix. 57 of those strategies are labeled as priorities. So as I've stated, I've tried to categorize them into several easy to identify categories to determine exactly how well we've been able to implement those strategies. I've organized it based on category, and I've also organized it based on timeline, as you'll see with the upcoming slides. So the framework that I had used for the analysis, the categories I created, I called in progress. These are the ones that are either in the process of being addressed or have already been completed. So those policies that you'll regularly see in the staff reports talking about applications being consistent with the place type and things like that are the policies that we're regularly looking at with most of our land use analyses. Things like that are contained in the in progress category. The land development code category, as I've stated, those are policies and strategies that are basically expected to be addressed through the upcoming land development code update. And then, as I stated, the global category is being addressed more on a global level between El Paso County and other stakeholders and jurisdictions. So I did receive data from Economic Development Department, Parks and Community Services Department, and Department of Public Works in order to gain a little bit more insight that I might not normally see on the day-to-day level. There is a lot of information in the master plan that doesn't strictly go through the planning department. So as I was getting into this, I found it was very interesting exactly what all of the other departments are doing to sort of come together and help implement this sort of unified plan. So the conclusions of that study, as I said, for a very, very preliminary analysis, being able to consider over half of the strategies as being addressed, I think is pretty good. So I came up with a number, 61%, being just a numerical analysis based on what categories I put each of the strategies and priorities in. And then 65% of the 57 priorities were also contained within the addressed categories. The tables here, table 1 organizes the strategies by chapter. Puts them into each category and then contemplates the percentage of those strategies that are addressed. So our top performers, for lack of a better word, are transportation, economic development, and land use, with a pretty overwhelming addressed status. And then table 2 organizes them by time frame. So the short term and midterm being the ones that we've addressed more of, with the long term and the ongoing still needing a little bit of work. And that makes sense that we would be addressing less of the long-term strategies. Hopefully, as we continue to report on this in the years to come, we'll start to see more of those long-term strategies come to fruition. The chart basically just provides a visual analysis based on chapter. So the blue bar is the total, with the other 3 bars representing the different categories. So I just thought this was a fun way to visualize the data, with the line representing the percent. So again, saying, highlighting those chapters that we've addressed the majority of the strategies on. I didn't think it pertinent to provide the specific list of strategies because this is intended to be a general analysis. Depending on who's looking at the strategies and who's analyzing the strategies, there could be discrepancies in the data. So this isn't really intended to be a hard line. Wow, we've addressed 61% of the strategies. I can go along and it is intended to be more general and to just sort of provide a little bit of insight into what we've been doing and how we've been approaching the master plan. And that's pretty much all that I had prepared for the presentation. I was expecting there may be some questions though, so I would like to open the floor to the commission for some questions if you all had any for me.
Great, thank you. I do have one. How are we doing on the priorities, those that are there? Is there anything that kind of jumps out at you as you've looked at this? To me, the whole idea of reviewing this thing periodically, it's nice to have a sense that, okay, 61%, that tells me a little something, but are we missing some big, some of those high priority items that we should now use your analysis we need to look over here for a little while and try to address these couple of things? I guess that's the piece that I would like to see, is a recommendation for where our emphasis needs to go next.
So I think, and this may be a point when Megan might need to jump in, but I do think that the answer to that question might come down the road with the next analysis once we start to see, are we still exactly where we were 3 years ago? Have we not really been able to address any more of the priorities, or are we seeing more of the priorities addressed? So I think once we start to establish a trend, that's when we'll be able to refocus our efforts and say, well, what about this? We're 6 years down the road and we're still not addressing what we had determined to be some high priority items. I think it's just a little tough to be able to answer without actually having any kind of trend. So the way that I had set up the categories was intended to be something that could easily be repeated, an easily repeatable analysis with the next 3 years and the next 3 years, so that even if I'm not the one that is performing the next update, someone could still go in and conceivably say, like, hey, have we done this? Does it fit into these categories? Can we call it something that's achievable, or is it something that we might need to refocus our efforts on to make it achievable? Does that make sense?
It does. My only pushback would be when we identified short-term things that need to be addressed in 0 to 3 or 5 years. If we wait for another, we've already skipped past that. If we wait for that trend to develop, and I will say though that I think for me the key is the rewrite of the land development code. The fact that process is starting, that will address a significant number of these items. So
I will say, and this is not intended to criticize the master plan. What I found interesting on table 2, you have your short-term, mid-term, and long-term, but the long-term is only 5+ years on a 25-year plan. To me, it almost implies that all of them are short-term in that regard, because that's the first 5 years of life of the plan. It almost implies that all of the short-term goals or policies should have been addressed by now. And it almost begs the question, should those years have maybe been 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15 instead of so quick?
Sure.
And I think that's kind of where I'm getting at with, maybe once we get into the 6 years, if we're still where we were today, then maybe that could be a change we might want to look at, is were the timelines reasonable?
Yeah, and that's it. It's certainly possible that the timelines that we looked at were more aggressive than we could realistically have expected. But we got it. Let's get it done. Let's start using it. I think the regular use, the things that you pointed out at the beginning, indicate that the plan has value. It is being used. Maybe there's an effort at some point to go back and look at those priorities and say, well, okay, should this, is this really a high priority, or is it something that, as we fix some other things, that kind of dropped off the table a little bit, and maybe it could stand to wait a little bit.
And technically too, the way the master plan identifies ongoing on the timeline is, it basically defines it as these will be implemented immediately and will be ongoing. And if you look on the table here, that's the vast majority of all of them. And I did see a bit of a feasibility issue with that, with several of the ongoing probably not being reasonable for us to say, okay, we're going right now and that's going to be ongoing. And I think that's kind of where maybe some of the timelines might not, I don't want to say it doesn't make sense, but where it might not be totally feasible right up front for us to implement 250 strategies immediately right from the get-go. And I think that's where we're seeing the lower numbers.
Well, and I guess that was kind of my initial question is more a more subjective kind of thing. As you looked at this, were there some, what were some of those things that, that jumped out at you as, hey, this was unreasonable from the beginning. We should have looked at it differently, because you have the benefit of coming in after the plan was adopted. So you're looking at it from a fresh perspective and not steeped in it like some of us were. So that perspective is useful and valuable in that it can identify a few things that, yeah, we can afford to get rid of this. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot right now to give me a list of those 5 things that stood out to you the most, but as you discuss it with staff and, that I think will be helpful, and that's the value of the review. Appreciate the summary. Does anybody else? Mr. Trowbridge have
Yeah,
some
if
questions?
I could follow up, because that's kind of the question I wanted to ask is, Ryan, as a user of this plan, as a planner, and sitting across the table from the developers together, what's your just general subjective impression of the plan and how useful it is to you as a tool, and what kind of feedback have you gotten from the developers in terms of its usefulness as intended?
I like the plan. I've gotten no, I do. I've gotten mixed feedback from the other users of the plan as to whether or not it's feasible, whether or not it's reasonable. I do think it's useful, and I absolutely think it's been useful in guiding what we generally do in the planning department. And I have had discussions with some other department heads, specifically from economic development and parks, where they have said they keep copies of it and they use it regularly and they find it very useful. So I would say on a global level, as far as the county's concerned, I would conclude that it's useful, and multiple departments have had use out of it and are consistently looking towards it. When I talked to the Parks Department, they heavily implied that they used a good chunk of the policies and the ideas in the master plan when they were working on their Parks Master Plan update as well. So they kind of went hand in hand with each other.
Mr. Chair, if I can just add too, any additional information. So this is our first report. We don't really know what you're looking for or what would be helpful. So this is our first take on, here's what staff proposes. If you'd like us to have a follow-up or have Ryan answer some specific questions, dig into something, we can certainly schedule that for a hearing in the future, to get to what you need to get to. I will tell you, as we go out and speak with citizens, and in fact, I was just on this past Saturday speaking to NEPCO, Northern El Paso County Neighborhood Group, about planning, what we do, how the process works. I can tell you that from a citizen perspective, I think we will continue to do this. We need to do maybe a better job of how the master plan is used and communicating that, because the criteria in the code says general conformance. And I was asked by the NEPCO group, well, what does that mean? And my response was, you tell me what you think general conformance means. It is subjective, and that is where planning gets gray. I had a couple conversations with a few gentlemen after, and I said, you find a land use application in your area, that's coming, that you don't like or that you do like, and you tell me why you think it meets or doesn't meet the master plan, and I could probably make an argument based on other sections of the master plan that is opposite to the argument that you are making, and that is where the subjectivity comes in. And that's where you are finding general conformance. And so I think that a part of this moving forward is going to need to be just kind of explaining to the public how the master plan is used and what it is, because there are definitely some general goals in there that could be interpreted different ways. And you know this, but how are we communicating that out to the public when we go and give these presentations to HOAs and neighborhood groups? And so I think we'll be talking a lot more about that when we move forward with the code update. I said, the master plan is our vision for what we want it to look like, and the code update is the tool on how we get there. And so that's going to be a very important tool. If there's anything you want Ryan to look at moving forward, or anything that we can monitor and track, we're happy to do that. And then I did notice, and this is just my 2 cents, that there are a lot of goals in that plan that we as the planning department don't impact. And how we update those to you is very difficult. We really don't have a great update for you on how those are progressing, other than asking those other departments. I've made it known at our executive team meetings with other executive leadership that we have this master plan, and other departments do also have goals within the master plan, and they are all aware. Some working with us better than others on what they are doing individually, and we'll continue to report that out to you. But our input somewhat ends there, right, Ryan? And just for Ryan to say that he's setting up a template doesn't mean that he won't be doing this in years to come. Many, many years to come, Ryan.
Well, I for one, thank you, Ryan, for this analysis. I think you did a fine job. Thank you.
I did want to say just kind of one more thing to close out, because you did, I think Mr. Trowbridge and Mr. Bailey had both mentioned, can we be a little more specific? And I would like to not be a little more specific at this stage. I think it would be very challenging for me to point to a specific policy and say, we don't find this actionable at this time, because like we've said, it's subjective. That could be one person's interpretation, but might not be someone else's, or I might not have all of the tools to determine whether or not it's something that's achievable or actionable. So I think the level of specificity on what's going to be achievable or what's not going to be reasonable is definitely going to come down the road once we've had more time with this plan and more time to evaluate and analyze it.
Well, I think the subjectivity of the whole thing is when you've got, 57 priority action items.
And how do we,
that's too many.
how do we determine?
And so it's the subjective look at, I don't think I can implement this. I don't think I can see how to do this. So I'm going to move to something that I can address right now. That's perfectly legitimate. That's fine. And the fact that we're, 3+ years into this, haven't been static. You haven't just been sitting here. You guys, the staff, you've implemented this plan. You've been working with this plan for some time and have taken steps to address these things, whether or not it's exactly what the consultant wrote as those top priorities with the inputs of everybody else or not. That's fine. As I said before, I think the value is the review. The value is somebody's looking at it, somebody's thinking about it. You're talking to us, we're giving you a little bit of feedback here to kind of define what we're looking for. And so as you identify those things, it's not like you have to come back to us and say, we're not handling this priority very well. If it's something that planning staff needs to address, you guys have the, have the authority to start to address that, whether or not, it's with us or not. And we do recognize that there are a lot of external agencies, external relationships that you've got to work with in order to get this stuff done. So, but let me add my thanks again. Appreciate this. Are there any other questions, Mr. Whitney?
It's a living document. Nobody's looked at it for 30 years. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you again, Brian, for putting this off a couple weeks and letting us get out of here a little bit earlier last time. And here we are, a little over an hour.
I have
Mr.
a
Smith,
question
yeah.
that's not related to this, but
No, the public comment was earlier.
so the question, since everybody's here and I still don't know a fraction of what you all know, today's discussion when we were talking about why aren't there more centralized water systems in these larger developments that we talk about, that's such an important question, I think, and I don't even know who to ask. What's the answer to that? Why is it not considered more often? And I'm not talking the sewage part. Where I live, I'm on Colorado Springs Utilities water, but I have my own septic tank. It works, it's fine. But being on a collective water system seems to make more sense than wells dropping everywhere. So
I can speak to that a little bit. And Mr. Gooman brought it up. They're horribly expensive. So at the $5 million that he suggested, I think that's really low.
Small system.
It would be a very small system. The well alone for a single well would be close to $1.5 million. And then you have to build the infrastructure, the pipe, the delivery system, right? Which gets super, super expensive in a hurry. And if you're talking about 2 wells in this case, you know, every one of those pieces just adds to the expense. So that's the real driver in comparison to an individual well on a lot where the person that's buying the lot, building the home, is going to be responsible for drilling the well themselves at something like $20,000 or $30,000.
right, so we take that 30,000, multiply it by the 322 homes that are being planned, and I don't have the economics in my head, but clearly at some point, especially when you have all of these subdivisions now joining each other, if we looked long-term, it just seems to make sense. I mean, there's a reason cities do it.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. It's just on the developer side, it's just so
Yeah.
onerous. Exactly.
Right.
So,
And
I mean, just go back
from the
look at
county-
last meeting, we had the Metro District,
Uh-huh.
right? And just go in and look at that. I mean, that's what you're talking about. It's creating a Metro District with tens of millions of dollars in capital.
And the county's not a
improvements.
water, we're not a water provider,
Yeah.
right? We're not a utility, and our code doesn't limit how you get there. We make a water finding based on the information that the property owner or the developer is bringing to us. So that could be central water, that could be well. They're working through the state, and we're looking at our code, but our code doesn't limit to how you get there. So we evaluate what comes in the door.
So it's just pure economics, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, just wanted to know.
Yeah, I wonder, when shortly after I came on the planning commission, we had an executive session one day and went downstairs, and Ms. Sego's predecessor gave us a tutorial on water. And I thought that was very useful. We haven't done anything like that since. And I don't know if there's something like that, not necessarily on this specific detail, but it would certainly touch on your question as to why we do things the way that we do, just the overarching water law and the conditions and things like that. So maybe that's something I'm not going to push for an answer right now, but we can think about if there's time of day where there's a light schedule and we can say, okay, let's go downstairs, talk for an hour, and just, or maybe even just anybody who wants to go down and get a little bit of a little bit more detail, because I know that helped me. And since we haven't done that, you're kind of picking up little bits and pieces of the water question just as we go through the different applications. Maybe there's a foundation of knowledge that we could work on beforehand.
And I wonder if, and that may be a policy, I mean, because Ms. Ego did a
really good presentation to us a while back. You remember on some of the, how does she arrive at her opinion on whether there's adequate water? And how that ties into the state engineer's office. And even though none of us know what's underground, we still offer an opinion on it. So she gave us a great presentation on that. I think your question is more a policy question. How do we decide how to handle water in the first place? Yeah.
Right, and that may not be our policy, you
Yep.
know, it's not our place to decide that. And I do recall seeing that on the agenda, and I may not have been here that time, so I don't remember that presentation, but periodically, I think stuff like that is valuable. I think so. So I'll leave it at that. Anything else before we adjourn? Thank you very much. We'll see you in a couple weeks.